Hey guys, welcome to another podcast, Trusting You're All Well. We're seeing in the world at the moment some real diversion in regards to our political stances and our ideologies around who we are, what we want to do, and what we want to create in the future. And it's led to some real, I think, misunderstanding amongst us all that can, one, be put down to just our own inability to listen to each other, or another thought is around more of a conspiracy theory, sort of bourgeoisie nationalism type strategy, where we're all being sort of facilitated into this space of being divided and against each other based on our nationality, our ethnicity, our sexual preferences, the way we decide to raise children, whatever it may be, so that we don't actually start a class warfare. So there's, I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a multi-layered sort of complex issue. But unfortunately, in the mainstream media, a lot of it is put down to a reductionist, fundamentalist. What is the easiest outcome that we can look at here in regards to why we just can't get along and we seem to be more separate than ever before. A simplistic look at it, which we might get on a 5-minute soundbite on a mainstream news media outlet, is not going to solve the problem. And so that's why of late I've really been getting into the likes of Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Rubin from the Rubin Report, Eric Weinstein, all these type of people. Joe Rogan's been a part of it as well. Sam Harris, who are looking at why it is we're behaving the way we are as a global society, and discussing these subjects in long format, such as podcasting. And they have coined a term. It's the intellectual dark web, where this sort of internet technology that has been provided to us, we're using for good to actually talk about these things and not have it wrapped up in a way that has been done so for the last 50 or 60 years with mainstream media especially. And so it's quite interesting times that we're in, that there's this sort of breakthrough that's coming out that are not they're not identifying with being steadfast in the left or steadfast in the right. They're not playing identity politics, which is rife in our culture. So identity politics is where an individual or a group of people will base their political preferences on the group they decide to be amongst or are born into, or the social cultural terms by which they find themselves. And the issue with identity politics is that it narrows perspectives right down. So what we used to have in our political structures was, and way a democratic society should work, is that people are able to determine who they want to elect or represent them based on what their ideology is, not necessarily what party they belong to or what they represent as part of their political party, and instead what are they going to bring to the table. And that's why we still see it, quite a lot of swinging voters, where, say, in Australia, for example, we have two main parties, the Liberal and Labor. In a healthy democratic system, you can swap between Liberal and Labor. What's occurring now, though, is that more and more people are playing with the identity politics side of things and sticking to one avenue or one stream, identifying themselves as being that, with being attached to that, and then not being able to listen to another's perspective. And it's creating massive issues in the world, to the point that we get somewhere like someone like Donald Trump in power, who is definitely not the best candidate for US president. However, the divisiveness there and the inability to communicate has led to someone like him more or less slipping through the cracks and rising up to power. So this shift that we've seen into like really strong left wing versus right wing, we see it in Australia as well. We're seeing it in Europe, where fear and tension are harboring these extremes to head left or right, is one, created from a lot of fear. Two, it's newsworthy, it's media worthy. Media want to see this derision. They want to see the fighting, the angst, because it sells more for them. I mean, and that's a state of where we are as a civilization, that we respond to and give our energy over to fighting instead of communicating and talking from an objective experience. So it's getting deeper and deeper. I'm sure if you've got any interest in politics, that you'll know yourself, or you've seen, or you've witnessed the real division that's occurring between the left and the right, and the fighting and the inability to actually be able to come together and communicate. One other aspect of that's aiding that is social media. And again, that's what we saw with the US election, where people were getting themselves into closed loop systems. That was aiding really just confirmation bias. So someone would come in with an ideology or a leaning bias towards a certain subject, and then that would be fortified by their newsfeed, and another person's perspective just was not being able to take into consideration, which is dangerous. Like, if we continue down that path, we are going to separate ourselves even more than we are now, which is going to lead to us imploding on ourselves. There's no other path except for that, imploding ourselves. It's not going to make us stronger. It's not going to allow us the space and the ability to create a better world. It's really just going to devastate us, because as a global civilization, as these human species, putting aside for a moment the fact that we're all interconnected with the environment, with nature, with the animals, just as a human species, we rely on each other. We're communal beings. We need to be with each other and communicate and work together in order to fulfill those aspects of ourselves that require like a reward system, an ability to sustain ourselves through food or art, whatever it may be. But the more divided we become, the less able we are to do that, and the infighting just allows for toxicity. And at the moment, we live in a world where those who are choosing to be in power, the sociopathic types, are playing on that. They see that's happening. Donald Trump, he spotted it. He saw that that's the way we're all going, and he utilized that to bring himself into power. He divided his nation. You know, it's us against the Mexicans, or us against the left-wing progressives, or, you know, us against everyone, instead of like, okay, how can we all work together? And one major issue with that thing I have is of that working together. Like, it's been taken over. Like, it's been, when someone says, oh, can we all just work together? It's been maligned and made fun of, and really had a lot of negative aspects associated with it. That has been some sort of hippie woo-woo bullshit, like to all work together. And I think it's putting aside that we can still have healthy competition, and that it's important to have that healthy competition in our lives, even when we're working together. We're perhaps just in a place now where we don't know what healthy competition is. It can be argued that's backed by our capitalist system, where it is about unhealthy competition, and a hierarchy that only rewards the very top and can leave the bottom quite destitute. On the flips, so that's, say, a right-wing perspective. On the left-wing perspective, for example, you have more of the socialist Marxist attitude, where it should be all fair and all even, but that's just as toxic as the hardcore capitalist regime. I mean, we've seen in our past what's happened in Marxist societies throughout the 20th century, and the devastation that causes on a population, the stunt in evolution, the mass murdering. It's not a tangible option. Socialism, communism, Marxism, it just doesn't work. And a lot of left-wing progressives especially will associate themselves with that is the answer. So, but neither are the answer. I mean, I firmly believe that we need to create something new. We need to create something novel, something different that hasn't been seen before or implemented within our society before. And as long as we keep fighting each other, this infighting, this us versus them mentality, this left-wing, right-wing bullshit, we'll never have an opportunity to create that. We'll never firstly create the space within ourselves, and then the space amongst our peers, our family, our friends, etc., and then have that, and then within that space create something that can tangibly benefit all of us. And that's where the conspiracy theory comes into it again. That and I'm not particularly into conspiracy theories, but that the elite, whoever they may be, want to keep us divided along those identity politics lines instead of looking at the class system and where we are at as a class system. So I've got a feeling perhaps, and what I hope is happening is that this division that's occurring through this identity politics, and the strengthening of it is more like is akin to Dante's Inferno. So we're actually just going through the seven realms of hell, and the only way out of that, and it's true in all mythology, is to go right through it and come back the other side. All mythologies are based on that concept of going through the pits and then coming back out clean the other side. Shawshank Redemption, for example. It's all these aspects of going out to find ourselves, but to really just understand that it's all along. When we return, it's all within. So that's what I hope is occurring, is that we're needing to understand ourselves better, find the polars, find the left, find the right, so we can know where that middle point is and to return to that. But it takes communication, it takes talking about these things, and that's why I'm optimistic that we have people like, again, Eric Weinstein, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, that they're actually discussing these things and talking about these things in an objective manner, not using emotion, not using subjective understandings of what they believe needs to happen, but actually being able to have a discourse around topics that are important. And it's the new wave, and it's one of the reasons I've decided I want to really return back to my podcast, is because we need to have a discourse about these things. We need to talk about it, because the alternative is that we're just going to implode on ourselves. And certainly since I had a daughter, like, my motivation to prevent that has become even stronger. That idea of leaving being part or leaving this sort of paradigm for her, which is just toxic. I don't want to know about it. Like, I don't want to have that for her. So I'm doing all that I can to help in the best way I can. And what's the best way that I can? And what's the best way you can? Well, as these members of the intellectual dark web and many philosophies and many, especially Eastern traditions, it's all about going within. And we need to move away from this thing of fixing the outside, like fixing everything around us. If that doesn't work, like if we're trying to, and that's what happens in fundamentalist religions, fundamentalist political views, so like extreme left wing, extreme right wing, is that it's all about fixing the outside, like need to fix this, need to fix that, need to fix that. But the journey or the battle of good and evil in this universe runs within us, runs right down the middle of us. It's got nothing to do with the outside world. It's right down here. So we need to we need to be with our own selves, understand ourselves, and in each moment decide upon good or evil. I mean, I'm using those terms as a whatever they are, but you understand what I mean. To decide on each moment, am I going to be the light within the darkness, or am I going to be the darkness within the light? And we do have those, even though it can be hard, we can train ourselves, train our mind, train our brain to decide upon that and enact it more and more quickly. So once we do that, once we all start doing that as a collective, when we start, or maybe we don't even need all of us to do it. There's that theory of the 100 monkey theory, or a critical mass. Once there's enough people understanding that this left wing, right wing, us against them bullshit is just a manifestation of this dualistic world that has been harbored upon us, and then start to understand that there is something greater, there is something more expansive, that point right there, the flow state is right here in the middle between us, or we can decide. That's when we'll start having more open discussion. That's when we'll start a discourse around creativity, abundance. What can we do in this world? We have all this potential. We have so much potential. Just the fact that we're even aware of ourselves as this human being, it's worth, as Duncan Trussell once described, it's probably worth about $1 billion an hour. This potential we have as a species to create and do and communicate, to fly to the moon, if we did in fact go to the moon, I'm not too sure, but build things that can run off sustainable energy, to build things that can travel to Mars or to outside the solar system. If we can use that within and use that same potential to create as one instead of divided and against each other, then it'd be incredible. And I'm not going to use the word utopian because I don't know. I'd love to see utopian society, and perhaps that has happened in past civilizations on this earth before. We certainly know historically that there's been large amount of times in different civilizations on this earth where there has been great peace. But we have the potential to create that and to exceed beyond our limitations, to transmit and transmute something that goes beyond us in order to create something that's above ourselves. And I think maybe what holds us back with that, though, is also a bit of fear, a fear of the unknown, when really it's exciting, like to be able to journey outside of ourselves, to transcend. That's really that's what all the religious doctrines hit on, is this understanding of the transcendent experience. But when it comes to fundamentalist religion especially, we're taught that only happens when we die, when it doesn't have to. It can be moment by moment, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. We have these small transcendent experiences that and allow us to perceive ourselves and perceive the world in a much different way, where social inclusion and social harmony becomes the norm. So I'd like to see the end of this identity politics. I'd like to see the end of people solely subjectively identifying themselves with either being left wing or right wing, or with this political party or that political party. A big part of it, I think, is to do with maturity. There's that youthful exuberance, and people, especially on the social fringes, whether they're lower on the social hierarchy or higher on the social hierarchy, they're still the fringes, that there's that strong identification. And we need to help people get back more into that middle ground, and especially the young ones. I know when I went back to uni for a period of time there, for maybe, I don't know, a month or two, I went to some of the Socialist Alliance meetings. So they're a very left-wing leading Marxist ideology, and a pretty quickly identified that a lot of their understanding of the world was misguided and based on their subjective understanding of who they were on the fringes of society, rather than the collective, what's really going on. And it's not like I really even blame them. I mean, so there were some older people there too, which I thought they should know better. But the younger ones especially, the sort of closed loop system that they found themselves in, going back to what I was talking about earlier with social media and their friends, etc., it doesn't allow for like a broader perspective of the way the world is and our history, learning from our history. So it was an interesting experience, but then to see how much sort of hatred and fear and toxicity was within those groups. I've got no interest in understanding anything about fundamentalist right-wing philosophy. That's just as abhorrent to me, even more so perhaps, because at least left-wing are more socially conscious. But I feel like the two have very limiting belief systems that can really limit us as a human potential. So moving away from that, finding the middle ground, finding balance. It's not boring to find the middle ground. In fact, it's the most amazing part of the human experience, has been able to witness and view and understand and take on various elements of people's perspectives and the way things are in the world. So yeah, we need to create, we need to communicate, we need to create a discourse where we can listen to each other and entertain others' ideas, and then be able to decide and implement without as much emotion, without the subjectivity that occurs at the moment. And I feel it's starting to happen, you know, we're starting to do that. There's small pockets of people that are just like, I've had enough of this bullshit. And that's one of the, I think, the advantages of having Donald Trump come in Australia. We've had similar setups in Europe as well, with this mass division between political ideologies. To be able to just say, enough's enough. Fuck, is this what we've created? Like, we need to do something different. And to start with, the best thing we can do is talk to each other, is to communicate, is to share our experiences. And then from there, who knows what happens? Who knows? But it's exciting. And the benefits of doing that, of talking and communicating, far outweigh the disadvantages of keeping separate and just fighting each other and imploding on ourselves. So, yeah, it's up to us as individuals. What do we choose to do? You know, fix ourselves, look at ourselves, find that balance in ourselves, tidy our own room. Begin with that, as one philosopher says. Start with tidying your own room, and then we can go out there and create the change, or be the change we want to be, as Gandhi said in a very famous quote. So yeah, thank you guys. That's it for this podcast. If you have any feedback or any questions, I'd love to chat to you more about this. But yeah, otherwise I'll see you next time. Bye.